I stood at the window and watched as the car pulled out of the driveway, turned right, and disappeared at the end of the street. I wondered why I wasn't more upset. I had just watched 10 years of my life drive away. Shouldn't I have felt something? Shouldn't I have done something other than shrug my shoulders and say, "Well, I'll go see what's dripping from the faucet"? Turning and heading for the kitchen, I replayed the events of the last 30 minutes in my mind. I came home from work and found my wife Peggy sitting at the kitchen table with a full glass of wine. As soon as I saw her sitting there, I knew something was wrong. First, she was home before me, and she never came home from work more than half an hour to an hour after me. Second, we had an agreement that whoever got home first would start making dinner, and there was nothing on the stove. And finally, there was the glass of wine. Peg rarely drank. I had barely entered the room when she asked me to sit down and said she wanted to talk. I took a beer from the fridge, sat down across from her, and she said, "Rob, I know you know this. Something's been wrong between us for the last 6 months. I don't understand why we're growing apart. I don't know what the problem is, you or me. But something's wrong. I've tried to talk to you about it, but all I hear from you is that we're just going through a rough patch and everything will work out. I've decided we need to separate. I'm not talking about divorce, just living apart for a while. I need space, Rob. I need to get away, take a look at my life, and figure out what's causing us to drift apart. You can use the time we're apart to look at things from your perspective." Come on, Peg, it's not that bad. Sure, we have problems. What marriage doesn't? But two people can't solve problems when they're apart and not talking. Talking won't help, Rob. You only see one problem in our marriage. You think the only problem is that we're not having sex. Your solution to the problem is for me to get naked and let you do whatever you want to me. I believe the problem runs much deeper than that. We don't make love anymore because I don't want to. We don't hug or caress each other anymore because I don't want you to touch me, and I don't know why I don't want you to touch me. I still love you. I love you as much as I did on our wedding day. But something is wrong, and I don't know what it is. I need space, Rob. I need to be alone to figure things out. So you want to throw away 10 years of marriage? No, Rob. I just believe we need to be apart for a while. I've packed my things and put them in the car. I'll stay with my sister until I find an apartment. I'll call you once a week to keep in touch. She stood up and said, "I have to go." I promised Mary I'd be there by 7. She turned and left without even kissing me goodbye, which made it clear to me where I stood. Plus. The news that Peggy and I had broken up spread quickly. Most of our friends sympathized with me and tried to cheer me up. Peggy called me once a week to ask how I was doing. I would say everything was fine, then ask how she was, and she would say everything was fine. Then I would ask if she was ready to come home, and she would say no, not yet. Peggy left 6 weeks ago when I started hearing things, disturbing things. For example, that she had a boyfriend who was living with her. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe that everything was as she had said, that she just needed time to gather her thoughts and that she would come home later. But I kept hearing things, and I decided to check out the rumors. I wanted to find out where Peg was living, dig through her things a little, and dispel the rumors. But no one could tell me where she was living, either because they couldn't or because they didn't want to, and I started to believe that something was wrong. I had dinner with my friend Tom and his wife Tanya, expressed my concerns, and mentioned that I was going to hire a private investigator to find Peg and confirm or disprove the rumors. I noticed Tom look at Tanya, and she nodded slightly to him. "Don't waste your money, Rob," Tom said. "The rumors are true. Most people who know you know what's going on, but they love you too much to tell you." "Tell me what?" "That Peggy left you to live with Adam White." "Adam White? Who the hell is Adam White? I've never heard of him." "He works with Peggy." "And she just left me to live with him? That doesn't make sense. If she was going to do that, why didn't she just divorce me? Why all this nonsense about a breakup?" You know Peg, Rob. She plans everything, comes up with backup plans, and then backup plans for when the backup plans don't work. She'd been seeing Wyatt for almost a year, and I believe she staged the breakup so she could come back home if life with Wyatt wasn't as romantic as she imagined it would be. And everyone knows about this, but no one told me? My God, what a wonderful group of friends I have. I got up, threw my napkin on the table, and said, "Thanks a lot. I'll figure this out myself," and left their house. On the way home, I thought about what I had just learned. No sex with Peg for over a year because she didn't want to make love to me. No affection for over a year because she didn't want me to touch her, and all that time she was cheating on me. Like a fool, I sat at home like a good boy and behaved myself while I waited for this unfaithful woman to come home. And all my friends, my wonderful friends, knew everything and just let me sit there staring at the walls, waiting. Well, the waiting is over. The next morning, I signed up with the Corliss Detective Agency and paid them a retainer. I told them where Peg and this white guy worked and asked them to gather as much dirt on them as possible. Then I went home and started making a list of everything I needed to do to break up with Peg. I decided to wait for the report from the detective agency, but when I got it, my list would be ready, and I would be ready. After making the list, I sat down and thought about what else I needed to do. I hadn't had sex in almost 16 months. First, Peg refused to be intimate with me for a year, and then we broke up. I had been a completely faithful husband, but now that I knew what Peg was up to, I was determined not to remain celibate. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my beer and making plans to end my long, dry spell, when I remembered what Tom had said about Peg. She planned everything. After living with her for so many years, I knew it was true. To me, that meant she had plans in case I found out what she was doing. Plans based on how she thought I would react to the news, and most importantly, plans to frame me if she decided that life with Wyatt was what she really wanted. I could imagine her watching me so that if I went out and did something rash, she could use it against me in the divorce. Suddenly, the list I had made was useless because she had probably anticipated my reaction. I had to go back to the drawing board, and a new list began to take shape, and as it took shape, I realized that a lot of what I wanted to do had to be done right away, not put off until the last minute, and there were things I could do to shove this Peg up her ass and make her bleed. I smiled at the thought and wondered if she had a plan in case something like that happened to her. The next morning, I went to the bank to deposit my paycheck, and while I was there, I looked in the safe deposit box that Peg and I rented. From the log, I could see that Peg seemed to check the safe at least once a week, and I realized that she was watching me and would pounce on me at the first sign that I had figured her out. I thought about it for a minute, then took the 5 certificates out of the plastic envelopes, went upstairs, copied all 5 on the bank's copy machine, and then put the copies back in the envelopes and returned them to the safe deposit box. Unless Peg took the certificates out of the envelopes to check them, she would never know they had been replaced. Then, knowing that Peg was watching me, I took my passport out of the safe and, when the woman from the bank put the safe back in its place, casually mentioned that I was going to Mexico to go fishing. I left the bank with 5 certificates of deposit in my pocket. I usually went to the bank twice a week on average, and each time I cashed 1 certificate of deposit, paid the penalty for early withdrawal, and hid the cash when I got home. I wasn't a fan of credit cards, as I believed they could easily get you into trouble. So the only cards in my name were an American Express card that needed to be paid off in full, a few gas company credit cards, and a low-limit Visa card in my name only. Peg, on the other hand, had half a dozen credit cards in her name alone, some with high limits. I knew what the limits were because I paid the bills every month, made a list of the balances, and set it aside. I made sure to make the minimum payments on those cards to keep them in good standing. I sat down and made a list of everything I wanted, then went online and spent the next few weeks shopping wildly with Peg's credit cards. When I ran away, she was left with credit card debt, and I intended to make it substantial. I upgraded my computer and bought a new Dell with all the bells and whistles. I bought a Remington 700 on eBay and a bunch of other stuff, like a digital camera and a state-of-the-art cell phone that could do everything except cook dinner. The house belonged to Peg. She got it from her parents, so I couldn't claim it, but we used it as collateral for an open line of credit when we installed the pool and hot tub, and the account had both our signatures on it. We paid off everything we borrowed, but the line of credit remained open. If I calculated correctly, I could use that line before she realized what I was doing. I wondered why, when she decided we needed to try living apart, she packed her things and left instead of asking me to move out. Now I knew. If I had stayed in the house, I would have waited for her to come back. I would have considered the break temporary. Then I closed my 401k retirement account at work, paid the penalty, and hid the money. Then I sat down and waited for the private investigator's report. The only thing I couldn't figure out was how to get her ashes. I couldn't risk Peg hiring someone to follow me and see if I went after him. I decided I needed to get out of town for the weekend under the pretext of going fishing. She knew I loved fishing and went often. And from the catches I brought home, she knew I really did go fishing. So I doubted she would hire a private investigator to follow me. She didn't need to go overboard, did she? After all, hadn't I been acting stupid? Hadn't she been cheating on me for over a year? It was Friday, and I was just about to leave work when Tanya called and asked me to stop by her place on my way home. I tried to make excuses, but she said it was important, and although I really didn't want to go, I agreed. When I arrived, she let me in and led me into the living room, where I saw Tom sitting in an armchair. He stood up, held out his hand, I shook it, and he told me to sit down and make myself comfortable while he got me a beer. "Tanya wants to talk to you, Rob, and you should know that I support what she's about to say 100%. He left the room and headed for the kitchen, and I looked questioningly at Tanya, and she said, "Just a minute, Rob, you're going to need a beer to get through this." Tom returned, handed me a bottle of Bud Light, and said, "I have something to do. I probably won't be back until midnight. See you later," and headed for the front door. I heard it open and then close behind him. The closing of the door was Tanya's cue to start the conversation. "Rob, you heard us when you left our dinner that night." I started to say something, but she raised her hand and said, "Let me finish. You were right, but it still hurt. In our defense, all I can say is that we love you very much and didn't want to hurt you. The situation was complicated by the fact that we are friends with Peg and hoped she would come to her senses and return to you where she belongs. We know you love her, or at least you did. But we didn't know if that was enough for you to forgive her, so we kept quiet. If you get back together and don't find out about this, you can move on with your life without worrying about forgiveness and forget about the past. That's all. That's our apology. But it's only part of the reason Tom and I wanted you to come. We know you, Rob, and we know what kind of person you are. You wouldn't cheat on your wife any more than you'd rob a bank. How long has it been since you last had sex?" That question caught me off guard. For the first time, I noticed how Tanya was dressed. A low-cut blouse that accentuated her ample breasts, a short skirt and high heels that showed off her gorgeous legs, and friend or not, I couldn't help but get turned on. Then I remembered Tom's words, "I'm 100% in," and it became clear to me where this was going. In a quiet voice, I replied that it had been a year and a half. She leaned toward me, and I glanced at her blouse as she said in a hoarse voice, "I'd like to change that, Rob. Tom is my friend, Tanya. I can't do that to him." I started to get up, but she grabbed my arm and pulled me back. "Tom doesn't mind, Rob. He left to give us some privacy. This isn't out of pity or charity, Rob. Tom and I have been discussing this for months. You have what we need, so I hope I can help you, and you can help us." "I don't understand what you're talking about." "I'll be honest, Rob. Tom is infertile, and we want a child. We want you to give us one." I was stunned. I sat there staring at her, unable to say a word. When I finally gathered my strength, I said, You just said you know I wouldn't cheat on Peg. Yes, she said, but that was before you found out what Peg was doing. Now that you know, you're free from your promise to her. Why me? We want it to be someone we know, not some anonymous father. We also want you to be part of the child's life. You'll be the godfather and always be there as Uncle Rob. This doesn't make any sense, Tanya. Of course it does. What if something happens to Tom and me? Who better than Uncle Rob to take care of the child? On the other hand, God forbid, what if the child needs a liver transplant or something like that? Would we be able to find an anonymous donor? And even if we did, would he agree to help? If we ended up on a waiting list, how long would we have to wait to find a suitable donor? No, Rob. We've thought this through. We want you to be part of our family. On the other hand, are you saying you don't like me? Now we can go to the bedroom and get serious about conceiving a child. I'd like to do this every day until I get pregnant, but Tom is used to making love 3 or 4 times a week, and although he doesn't mind, I don't want to be his backup. Call me tomorrow, okay? I thought about what had just happened all the way home, and when I pulled up to the house, it occurred to me that if Peg had been watching me, she knew about my visits to Tom and Tanya and had noticed that Tom had left and I had stayed for several hours. The next morning, I called Tanya and explained my thoughts to her, but she told me not to worry, that no one had seen Tom leave because he hadn't. He had gone down to his workshop in the basement and stayed there until I left. This information made me think. It was one thing to make love to Tanya when Tom wasn't home, but could I do it knowing he was in the house? Tanya must have known what I was thinking, because she said, "Don't worry, Rob, everything will be fine, I promise." That same day, Tom called and asked me to have a drink with him after work. How awkward. Imagine sitting with a man you've known for 20 years who is a good friend of yours and whose wife you just slept with, and he knows about it. He must have known what I was thinking because he got straight to the point. I know you're uncomfortable, Rob. Hell, buddy, I'm uncomfortable too, but I need to talk to you about the situation we're in. First of all, I told you when I left you and Tanya alone that I was 100% on board. I mean it, Rob, but I have to tell you that Tanya hasn't told you the whole truth. I know she told you about her desire to have a child and my infertility, but I also know she didn't tell you the rest. I'll be honest with you, buddy. I can't perform. I haven't been able to make love to Tanya for over a year. My God, that's why she was so hot last night. She was trying to make up for lost time, and when she told me she didn't want to be second to Tom, she was just trying to cover up his inability. She didn't want me to know he was impotent because she didn't want me to lose respect for him as a man. Not that I would have, but she didn't know that. What a difference between her and Peg. Tanya put Tom first, even in difficult circumstances, while Peg only thought about herself. I don't know if it dawned on you last night, Tom continued, but Tanya is a very sexy woman. She tried very hard to control herself, Rob, but sooner or later she would have cheated on me. I know it sounds harsh, but that's how it would have been. I know she loves me and that she would have done anything to hide her infidelity from me, but I would have found out anyway. How could I not? If she had slept with someone, she would have stopped climbing the walls, and I would have noticed. I love her, Rob. This woman is my whole life. Without her, I'd just die. And that's the whole problem. If she left and cheated on me behind my back, I couldn't live with her. I'd know why she did it, and I'd understand why she did it. But I couldn't live with that dishonesty. The only solution, at least as far as I could see, was to do it openly. But Tanya isn't the kind of woman who would agree to take a lover and go into the bedroom while I'm sitting in the living room watching TV while she's having sex. She probably could have done it with a stranger in a motel so I wouldn't find out. But she couldn't just sleep with one guy when I knew about it, and then another the next week and another the week after that. We needed someone permanent, someone we both liked and felt comfortable with. We sat down and made a list of possible candidates, but we couldn't agree on anyone. We kept coming back to you, but we were afraid that if we started with you and then Peg came home, It would all end, and we'd have to start all over again. And Peg would end up coming back to you. Everyone who knows Adam White knows he's an idiot, and Peg will soon realize that and come back to you, convinced that you had no idea what she was up to. I don't understand why she thinks you're so stupid. I can only guess that she believes you love her so much that it would never occur to you that she might be up to something. I couldn't help but smile. She read me like an open book because that's what I was, and it was only because we were apart for so long that I finally realized something was wrong. Well, now you know, and I know, even if Peg doesn't, that now that you know, she's history. I know you'll never go back to her. It freed Tanya and me, and we were able to turn to you. Tanya and I want a child, Rob, and Tanya needs a stable sex life, and until the doctors find and fix my problem, someone else has to provide that sex life for her. I know it sounds stupid, but the fact that you'll be making love to my wife will save my marriage. You just have to accept what I know and that I'm okay with it. I didn't know what to say. It was all so unbelievable that even though it had already happened once, I still couldn't believe it. Tom stared into his glass, then looked up at me and said, "It kills me that I can't take care of my wife, Rob, but it will kill me if I lose her. I need you to do this for me, buddy. I really need it. Can I count on you?" I looked at him for a few seconds, then nodded my head. On Sunday, I invited Tom, Tanya, and 3 other couples over for a barbecue, and when the others left, Tom went into my office and started playing on my computer, while Tanya and I went up to my bedroom. This is my house, Tanya, and in my house and on my bed, we do what I want. Peg dumped him? That woman must be crazy or stupid. On Monday afternoon, I met with John Abbott from the Corliss Agency, and as he handed me the report, he said, "I'm very sorry. Every time I take on a case like this, I hope it's just a misunderstanding and nothing serious is going on, but in this case, there's no doubt about it. Your fee also covers our legal expenses if you decide to go to court." I shook his hand, left his office, and on the way home, I wasn't as angry as I thought I would be. Probably because I had already accepted it as a fact, and by the time I received the report, everything had been decided in my mind. What was I going to do in this situation? Nothing I hadn't already done. The only thing left for me to do was figure out when to withdraw the money from the line of credit secured by my real estate so that Peg wouldn't find out until it was too late. I was going to meet with a lawyer and prepare the documents, but I wasn't going to hand them over until I was ready. Over the next 5 weeks, I saw Tom and Tanya 3 or 4 times a week at their place or mine. They spread the word that I was going through a rough patch and that they were spending time with me to cheer me up. Peg still called me every week, but I stopped asking her how she was and when she was coming home. Finally, I decided I'd had enough. I wrote checks on my line of credit, and as soon as they cleared, I found an apartment, moved out, and served Peg with divorce papers. Instead of adultery as the reason for the divorce, I listed irreconcilable differences. I did this so that Peg wouldn't find out what I knew about Wyatt. She would have believed that I was trying to get her to come back home. She would have called me, talked a lot of nonsense about how I was overreacting, and then probably suggested we meet somewhere for drinks and dinner, where she would have tried to calm me down and talk some sense into me. I would agree to meet her, listen to her, and then say I would think about it. That would give me a few days to check my credit lines and clear out my checking and savings accounts. Everything went as I expected. First, she called and said I was being unreasonable and that I didn't need a lawyer. I told her I was tired of the uncertainty. "You don't want to be with me, so it's time for me to accept that and move on." I agreed to meet her at Angelo's restaurant. I hadn't seen her since she left me, and she looked good. I'm going to miss her. No, I already miss her. Because it was obvious that I still loved her, but even if she came back to me, I know I could never live with her again. But I didn't tell her that. Instead, I sat there and listened to her feed me all her nonsense. She had been seeing a therapist who was helping Peg understand blah, 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 and Peg was making good progress, and she just needed a little more time. I know this is hard for you, baby, but it's just as hard for me. Please, baby, please give me a little more time. I told her I'd think about it and let her know. I waited 2 days, then called my lawyer and told him it was time to move on to phase 2. He withdrew the divorce papers and sent Peg a notice of withdrawal. Peg called me from work, thanked me, and said I wouldn't regret it. I smiled, knowing I wouldn't, but she didn't know why. She would find out soon enough. That evening I had dinner at Tom and Tanya's, and after dinner, Tanya and I went to her bedroom, and when Tanya opened up to me, she said, "Can we make love tonight instead of just having sex? I want to make love to the father of my child." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. The home test came back positive on Tuesday, and the doctor confirmed it this afternoon. You're going to be a father." When it was over, I told her that I might not see her for a while. "This week I'm going to end this charade with Peg and White, and I may have to leave town for a while." "Don't do anything too drastic, lover. I'm going to need the father of my child." "It'll be Tom, dear. You need to start believing that." "You know what I mean, lover. Just because I got pregnant doesn't mean I don't need you anymore." Adam White was a man who loved his job and his family. That Wednesday, he left the meeting in a good mood, as after talking to several influential members, he believed he had a chance if he ran for a higher position in the order. He was in the same good mood when he got out of his car in the parking lot of his condominium. He locked the car door, turned around, and felt a searing pain, after which everything went black before his eyes. He was found by a neighbor who called an ambulance, and the medics who arrived at the scene took him to the emergency room of the hospital, where they found that both his arms and legs were broken and he had serious injuries to his genitals. When he opened his eyes and saw that he was in a hospital room, he felt intense pain and realized that he couldn't move. His arms and legs were in casts, and he was hooked up to a ventilator. Before losing consciousness again, he saw Peggy standing next to his bed with a look of horror on her face. I wasn't there when it happened, of course, but I was told everything that happened when a man entered the room and approached Peg, who was standing next to the bed looking at White. The man asked her if she was Margaret Olson, and when she said yes, he handed her some papers and told her she was being served with a court summons. She looked confused when she opened the envelope and saw that she was being sued for divorce, only this time for adultery. She looked at the words, adultery, then at the broken man lying in front of her, and her face turned pale with horror as she realized what it meant. She just moaned, "Oh, God," then sat down on a chair and began to cry. I stayed there long enough for the police to ask me where I had been that night. It turned out that I had been at a poker game that started an hour before I met the Eagles and lasted until an hour after White was taken to the hospital. Peg paid for my alibi, although she didn't know about it. The guys were on my side and would have done it for free, but it was about getting back at Peg, so I used her credit card to show my appreciation. The Home Shopping Network took her Visa card number for the digital cameras I gave Bill and Steve. eBay charged her MasterCard for the laptop I gave Mike and the 19-inch flat-screen monitor I gave Phil. She even paid for the aluminum baseball bat. I had 6 weeks of vacation and 3 weeks of compensatory time, so I took 2 months off, and when the police were satisfied that I had nothing to do with White's misfortune, which they could have proven anyway, I left town to go fishing in Mexico. Before I left, I told my lawyer not to rush the divorce, but to just wait until Peg started to resist, and then drop it. We would remain married, but I would have nothing to do with her. I called Tom and Tanya once a week to see how things were going, and they told me that Peg had returned home and, as far as they could tell, true love was not meant to be for Peg and White, because she never returned to him after the day she was handed the divorce papers while standing at his hospital bedside. I guess the credit card bills started coming in, and she discovered that her savings and checking accounts were empty, her line of credit was maxed out, and the certificates of deposit in her safe were fake, because the next thing I heard was that Peg was desperately trying to find me, and no one could tell her where I was. My boss, who knew the whole story, told her that I had left when she called him trying to find me. He told her that I had just come in one day, said I was leaving, and asked him to write me a check. In essence, he made her believe that I had quit without warning. He didn't tell her that, but he made her believe it. A call to my lawyer asking to meet with her gave her the information that I had dropped the divorce proceedings, paid him off, and that he no longer represented me. She had no choice. 4 months after I left for fishing, she declared bankruptcy. As a result, she lost her home, was forced to sell her Lexus, and started driving a used Geo. When I found out, I returned from Mexico, rented an apartment on the other side of town, far away from where Peg lived, and tried to stay out of her sight. Tanya was 5 months pregnant and looked sexier than any other woman, and we resumed our relationship. This time, we didn't have to worry about anyone watching us, and 2 or 3 times a week she would spend the night at my place and I would spend the night at hers. I returned 2 months before Peg found out, and one day when I left work, she was waiting for me in the parking lot. She got out of her car and walked toward me, but I ignored her, got into my car, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw her running to her car, and I slowed down so she could see me. I wanted to talk to her, but not in the parking lot at work. I drove so she could easily follow me, and 10 minutes later I pulled into the parking lot at Bud's Bar and Grill. By the time she parked, I was already inside, sitting at the bar and ordering a Bud Light when she walked in, looked around, saw me, and headed toward me. She was already yelling as she approached. "Don't think you can get away from me, you bastard." I knew Peg, so I knew what she was going to do, and when she swung at my head, I spun around on my chair and grabbed her wrist. I squeezed it as hard as I could, and she was choking, and I said, "I have every reason in the world to hurt you, Peg, so you better not push me. Keep your hands to yourself if you don't want to feel real pain." I let go of her wrist and said, "I didn't run away from you. I drove slowly so you could follow me. I wasn't going to air your dirty laundry in the parking lot where I work. It doesn't matter here because everyone here already knows you're a slut. I want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. I've heard enough of your lies. I want my money back." "What money, Peg?" "You owe me the money you took from the house, and half of everything we had was mine, and I want it back." "Well, you're not getting it, Peg. My position is that it was compensation for what you did to me. What do lawyers say when they file a lawsuit? Compensation for pain, suffering, and loss of marital rights? I think what I got is more than enough to cover the pain and suffering I went through being deprived of sex for a year and a half while you gave yourself to another man, and the humiliation I felt when everyone I knew looked at me like I was a stupid cuckold. Damn you, Rob, you made me lose my parents' house." "So what, Peg?" "It couldn't have meant that much to you, since, as I recall, you left to live with another man." "I'm serious, Rob. I want that money." "Here's some news for you, Peggy. You're not getting a penny from me. You tried to cheat me, but you got caught, and I made you pay. Deal with it." "I guess we'll just have to wait for the court's decision." "It doesn't matter what they say, Peg. It's going to be the way I said. You're going to have to hire a lawyer and take me to court to get a property settlement. As soon as you file, I'll file a counterclaim. A good lawyer can drag this out for 6 to 8 months, and all that time you'll be paying your lawyer. Can you afford to pay him and get nothing? I have all the evidence I need to fight you in court, and if I win, you'll be left with nothing. In the worst case, I'll be ordered to divide the property. I'll say, 'Fine, Your Honor,' and walk out of the courtroom. You and your lawyer will wait and wait and wait for the money, but it won't come. You call me, but I don't answer. So your lawyer, whom you are still paying, goes back to court and gets a court order requiring me to pay by a certain date. You and your lawyer wait and wait, and when the deadline passes, you still haven't received a penny from me. Your lawyer, who is still billing you for his time, goes back to court and gets a judgment against me. I have no savings or checking accounts that can be garnished. My car is leased, so you can't get anything from that. I live in a furnished apartment, so you can't get anything there either. All you can do with your court judgment is garnish part of my paycheck, and as soon as I get a paycheck with the garnishment, I'll quit my job. And what will we get, Peg? A year's worth of lawyer's fees out of your pocket and a mere $200 from one paycheck. All you can do is go back to the judge and ask him to threaten me with jail for contempt of court if I don't comply with his order. All you'll get, Peg, is a postcard from me in some fishing village in Mexico, where I'll live until the money runs out. And I've got plenty of that, Peg, thanks to you. Forget it, Peggy. You set me up, you got caught, and we're even. Consider yourself lucky. Think about what happened to your boyfriend and consider yourself very lucky. You, on the other hand, can still sleep with whoever you want. I knew it. I knew you had something to do with what happened to Adam. What you believe and what you can prove are two very different things, Peg. By the way, how's your love life? I hear you haven't seen the poor guy since the day he was taken to the hospital. Why would I? You took away the only thing he had. Oh, that's cruel, Peg, even for you. It's true. He was very well endowed and a wonderful lover, but I would have gotten tired of him eventually and come back home. Oh, Peg, if only I had known. All this trouble could have been avoided if I had known you would come back to me one day. Damn it. It seems I've ruined everything with my actions, hasn't it? I'll carry this burden until the day I die. What a joy life could have been if we had communicated better. You're such a jerk. Yes, Peg, and you're a useless, fickle woman. I finished my beer, stood up, and said, I wish you a rotten life, Peg, and walked out of the bar. 3 days later, I was served divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences. I didn't contest the divorce, and she was awarded half of our joint property, and I was ordered to pay her the money I owed her. I wished her luck in getting everything and threw the final decision in the trash. She must have believed me when I told her how it would be, because I never heard from her again. One interesting thing came out of this mess. Everyone agreed that White was a jerk, but even jerks can have a couple of friends, and one of White's friends was Peggy's boss. He didn't like how she treated White after his misfortune, so he fired her. Well, fired isn't exactly the right word. The economic downturn required staff cuts, and Peggy was laid off, but everyone knew she had been fired. She couldn't find work in our area, so she moved to California, where she had relatives, and no one, not even her sister, has heard from her since. There's another chapter to this story. It was a sad ending, but at the same time, a glorious beginning. Tanya had a beautiful baby girl, and Tom adored her and spoiled her rotten. Uncle Rob visited often and spent hours crawling around on the floor with little Martha. Tom never told Tanya or me the whole story. He knew why he had problems with potency, but he didn't tell Tanya about it. He had cancer that wasn't detected in time and spread. After the funeral, Tanya handed me an envelope addressed to me. It said, "For Rob only." I looked at her. She shrugged and said, "I don't know. It's addressed to you, so I didn't look inside." I opened it and read, "Hi, buddy. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. I chose you," yes, it was me, not Tanya, "to be the father of our child for one reason. I knew I couldn't be there for them, and I wanted someone I trusted to be there for them. I knew I could count on you, so I chose you. Don't let me down, buddy. Take care of our girls." I gave the letter to Tanya. She read it and cried. I hugged her to comfort her, and when she stopped crying, she asked me what I was going to do. "I'm going to do what he knew I would do. I'm going to take care of my girls." 6 months later, Tanya and I got married.